This is a production of World Video Bible School. To God be the glory.
Soma. Soma, that means body. Christos. Oh, hi. You've caught me working on my vocabulary words. I spend time doing that every once in a while because I need to brush up on some of the words that we run into, and also I'm trying to learn new words all the time to add to my vocabulary. I want to encourage you, if you haven't done so, to go out and buy a set of 3x5 index cards or just make your own and be making some vocabulary words or flashcards that you can use in your study of the Greek vocabulary words. I hope that you've already done that in regard to your letters and to the diphthongs, but I wanted to show you these and just kind of what I've done. I make my own cards because I feel like that if you can write the word and see it and write it, that you're just going to be reinforcing that word in your mind and its meaning. And so what I do is I just write the word on one side and make it where I can flip it over and then see the English definition or translation on the other side. And then when it comes to working with these vocabulary cards, maybe you'll get about 15 or 20 vocabulary words at a time in a chapter that you're supposed to memorize. And instead of just getting that big stack of 15 or 20 cards and working with one and then putting it at the bottom and then 15 or 19 words later you come back to it, that's a long time, and sometimes you forget what that word is and it hasn't really been embedded in your mind. So what I like to do is take about 3 or 4 cards at a time, and I'll write that word down and write the English word on the other side, as I mentioned, and then just work with those 4 words until I can become very proficient at it. So theos is God, cardia is heart, pater is, and if I can't think of it, I'll just turn over and look at it, and then I'll say it again, and then I'll put it at the bottom of the stack. And then when I've gone through those and I feel fairly comfortable with them, I'll shuffle them up a little bit and then do them again until I can do all 4 of those cards just real quick. Apostolos, apostle, pater, father, theos, God, cardia, heart, apostolos, father. And then once I've done that, I'll pick up about 3 or 4 more and I'll work with those cards. And I'll go through the same thing. Soma, which means body. Christos, which means Christ. And I'll work with those cards until I get those done, and then I'll put them with the other 4 or 5 cards that I've been working with, and so I have a stack of about 8 or 9 now, and I shuffle those up and I go through those again, and I keep doing those until I can do them just very quickly. Theos, God, cardia, heart. And then I get 4 more and add to that list after I've worked with 4 or 5 by themselves. And before long then, you've learned those 15 or 20 vocabulary words for that chapter, and they're embedded in your mind and they're ready to go, and it makes it easier for you in reading through the Greek New Testament and reading these assignments and enjoying Greek a whole lot more. Something else you can do, and is certainly acceptable, and there are some advantages to buying some cards, and you can see that I have a box here that you can pick up at just about any religious bookstore or order them over the internet or through the mail. And inside of those cards, or inside of that box, are some little cards, pre-printed. They have on there the Greek word on one side, and they're even numbered so that you can find them easily if you're just trying to pick out certain ones out of this stack. They have a little number there, and then you can flip them over, and as you can see, they have some small lettering there, and they're a little bit smaller in size so that you can carry them with you perhaps a little easier. Something else I like to do is just take these with me to maybe the grocery market, and while I'm waiting on my wife, or if I'm on a trip somewhere and on an airplane or on a bus or train and I have a little time by myself, I'll just have these in my pocket and I can take them out, and while I'm just sitting there killing time, I can learn some Greek words. So that's a good way to make effective use of your time and to reinforce a lot of what you're learning. So I just wanted to share those with you before we begin today's lesson. Well, today we're going to talk about word pronunciation and vocabulary. And as we do that, I'm sure that you have discovered that in reading through the vocabulary list or looking through some of the words, that it can be a little bit intimidating in terms of trying to pronounce that word correctly. How do we do it? But one of the ways that we can do it is to realize that words are made up of syllables. And those are just units of letters that are usually pronounced with one breath of air. As we exhale that air out of our lungs to say these words, that one breath of air will allow us to pronounce that one small unit. And so what we want to try to do is then break down that word into its proper syllables. And it sometimes is a little hard doing that, but I'm going to give you some guidelines that will help you to pronounce those words, some guidelines for pronunciation. So in order to pronounce a Greek word, you can do really one of two things. You can just listen to how your instructor pronounces the word and just sort of go with your feeling on it, much like we do in English. For example, if you'll look over here at the board, I'll tell you what I'm talking about. You can notice that we just sort of by memory know that this is one syllable, man. And then we could easily break this up into woman if we talked about a woman. That is just sort of a natural break there. And you go to the Greek and the same thing. If you just learn that's ek, that's just one syllable, ek. And then you learn that logos is made up of two syllables, logos, that's one word. And after a while it just sort of becomes natural to you in utilizing those consonants and breaking them up into syllables. Well, you can just go with your feeling, or you can go through a set of guidelines and principles. And I'm going to share those with you now, and I got those from a book that is entitled Basics of Biblical Greek. I've referred to this before. It's by William D. Muntz, and it's an excellent book, and in this book he has a list of guidelines. Now I want to just tell you something at the very outset, that there are some differing opinions about maybe how best to break up some of the words, and some of these rules sometimes end up being broken in a way. They're not real hard and fast. Some of them I think are fairly hard and fast, but they're just some general guidelines to help you, to give you some sort of system by which to maybe break down some of these words as you pronounce them. And then after we're through with these rules that are listed here in this book, I'm going to show you perhaps an even easier way to learn how to pronounce these words, sort of a quick reference from a book that we'll talk about in just a moment. But let's go to the rules, and let's take a look at the first rule here. So these are the guidelines for pronunciation. All right, number one, there is one vowel or diphthong per syllable. And if you'll take a look at that first word, you can see how it's divided up. And I'm going to pronounce the word, and then you can say it right after me. A, K, Ka, Amen. All right, A, K, Ka, Amen. All right, and that basically just means we have heard, and you'll learn that word perhaps a little bit later on. It's from 1 John chapter 1, verse 1. But as you notice, in taking a look at that word, you can see there is just one vowel per each one of those syllables. So there are as many syllables as there are vowels or diphthongs in a word. Take a look at the next word. Mar, tu, ru, men. All right, let's say it again. Mar, tu, ru, men, which means to bear witness, and that's also found in 1 John chapter 1, but this time in verse number 2. Now, take a look at that word and see that, again, there is one vowel per syllable, and in the third syllable we have a diphthong. See those two vowels together forming the diphthong? And so we put those together, and then at the end we have epsilon as our final vowel. If you go back through that word again, the first syllable, alpha, second syllable, upsilon is our vowel, third syllable is our diphthong u, and then the fourth syllable is the letter epsilon for our vowel, and we have one vowel or diphthong per syllable. Okay, let's go to the second rule, second guideline. A single consonant by itself, not a cluster, goes with the following vowel. Now, let me pause for just a moment, and I want to tell you something about what I mean by not a cluster, okay? Sometimes that's a little bit arbitrary, but if you look in some of the vocabulary words and hear your instructor pronounce the word, or if you'll see in some of the grammar books, they'll let you know that occasionally some consonants can go together. Some consonants can start a word and can go together, and it's sort of a natural thing, and you'll just have to kind of feel your way through that. But for example, the word or the letters sigma and tau sometimes are a cluster. They can go together, and it's not a problem to break those up. So that's why I'm saying these are guidelines and not necessarily hard and fast rules. But let's go back now and look at that number 2, the rule there, a single consonant by itself, not a cluster, goes with the following vowel. And notice then the first word. Let's say it and pronounce it after me. E-O-Ra-Ka-Men. E-O-Ra-Ka-Men. Okay, so if you look at the very first part of that word, we're going to have one vowel or diphthong per syllable, and epsilon omega does not constitute a diphthong, so we have to divide that up. All right? And so the rule then says, well, I've got a single consonant by itself. See, it's wedged between the omega and the alpha. Rho is a consonant. So what I'm going to do is place that rho with the following vowel. Okay, ra. And then I have another example of that with the letter kappa. Kappa is wedged in between two vowels, so it's a single consonant by itself. It's going to go with the following vowel to form a syllable, the syllable ka. All right, and then you have another example of mu being a consonant by itself. It's going to go with the following vowel, epsilon. And you say, well, what about nu? Well, we're going to see a rule here in just a moment that says if you have a consonant at the end of the word, it's going to accompany the preceding vowel. We'll take a look at the second word there. E, the, a, sa, me, tha. Ethe asa metha. And again, the same rule applies. If you look at the very first part of that word, you have the consonant theta that's in between two vowels. Between the two vowels, that one vowel, epsilon, mentioned twice there, written twice. So it's going to go with the following vowel. And then we come to the next letter, alpha, and that goes back to the first rule, which says we can't have more than one vowel or diphthong per syllable. Well, epsilon and alpha don't form any kind of diphthong, and so alpha ends up being by itself. And then you have the sigma, which is a consonant, again wedged between two vowels. It's going to go with the following vowel, and so forth. And so now maybe you can begin to see how some of these guidelines are utilized. Let's take a look at the third guideline. The third guideline says this, that two consecutive vowels which do not form a diphthong are divided. And we've already kind of been talking about that. Two consecutive vowels which do not form a diphthong are divided. Take a look at that first word. It's the same word we just got through looking at. E, the, a, sa, me, tha. Now, the second word is a word that you might find a little bit strange because you're wondering, well, why is that diphthong divided there? That's where I want to go back to the board now and explain something to you. We're going to look at a particular word here, the word that you just saw on your screen, and it's this word pronounced a-sa-i-as. A-sa-i-as. What does that sound like? A-sa-i-as. Well, that's the Greek word for Isaiah. Isaiah. Now notice something. There are two small marks right above that iota there. And what that signifies is that while normally alpha iota is a diphthong forming one sound, in this instance we're going to have to divide it, and it means that it's not a diphthong. And this is called a diaeresis. It's a mark to help the reader understand as they're pronouncing the word that you divide this diphthong, so it's actually not a diphthong, it actually forms a separate syllable in and of itself. So if we go back and look at that word up on the screen again as we had it just a moment ago, you'll see it there now. And that very first letter, by the way, looks like an H. It's the capital Eta. It's the capital Eta. So A-sa-i-as for Isaiah. All right, well, let's go to rule number 4, or guideline number 4. A cluster that does not begin a word is divided, and the first consonant goes with the preceding vowel. And again, on this idea of clusters, you just have to sort of learn that as you go along and accept others' word on that when they tell you that these particular consonants form a cluster. But if you will notice that in that first word, m, pros, thin, m, pros, thin, that you have 3 consonants that are right in a row. And so we're going to have to divide that. Well, that first consonant, mu, is going to, as the rule says, go back to the preceding vowel. Then you've got a cluster that can be a cluster. It's acceptable for P and Rho to be together there. And so it's going to go with the following vowel. And then you come to 2 more consonants, and those don't end up forming a cluster that is acceptable, so the sigma goes back with that. And by the way, that word pros, you'll see that a lot. It's used in reference to prepositions, and just sort of after a while you'll get the hang of it, and you'll see that pros just sort of goes together. But that theta then is going to go with the following vowel, and then again, a rule that we've mentioned before is that when you have a consonant at the end of the word, don't leave it by itself, bring it on back with the preceding vowel. All right, then in the second word there, you can see the word archais, which means beginning, and that's a form of the word that's found in John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word. All right, archais. Well, you can see that we have a consonant cluster there, 2 consonants together that need to be divided, and that rho is going to go with the preceding vowel, and then the key is going to go with the following vowel, eta, and then at the end we have a consonant by itself that needs to come together in one unit, so archais. Archais. Okay, let's go to rule number 5. Guideline for pronunciation number 5 says this: a consonant cluster that can begin a word goes with the following vowel. So occasionally you'll run into a situation where you have a consonant cluster, 2 consonants that can go together, and in this case you see it right here, ki and rho. It goes with the following vowel, iota, so it forms that one syllable, kri, and then we have a consonant cluster that can go together, sigma tau. It's going to go with the following vowel, and then the sigma then is united with the rest of those, Christos, for Christ. And then the same rule applies for our case. Now let's go to guideline number 6. Guideline number 6 says this, that double consonants are divided. Double consonants are divided. And if you'll look down there, that word, apagelomen. Apagelomen. All right, that means we announce from 1 John chapter 1, verse 2. And what you have there is a situation with 2 gammas that are close together, 2 gammas. And one thing I want you to remember is that when you have 2 gammas like that, the first gamma is going to actually have the N sound, the N sound. So, apangelomen, apangelomen, okay? And actually, I guess even more, anpangelamen. Sometimes I don't quite get my omicrons like I should, and you'll have to correct me and just notice that as you go along, because sometimes we make mistakes, and you will too. But go back to the word now. Let's look at it again. Apangelamen. All right, and that double gamma is divided. Then the next word, same rule again here. Paresia. Paresia. And we're going to divide that double consonant. Okay, let's go to guideline number 7. Guideline number 7 says, any consonant plus a mu or a nu goes with the following vowel. Any consonant plus a mu or a nu goes with the following vowel. All right, take a look at that first word. Ethnesen. Ethnesen. And by the way, that's the word for Gentile, and we have a nu there in that first word, and so a consonant plus a nu is going to go with the following vowel. Same thing in the word pneuma. Now, I've heard some pronounce it. For example, Muntz pronounces that word as pneuma. He actually pronounces the P. Some say it's silent. But the point is here is that P is actually going to go with the nu there to form that one syllable with the diphthong U. So pneuma, pneuma. Okay, and then you have a rule applied there again with the mu that's in between the upsilon and the alpha is going to go with the following vowel. All right, let's look at guideline 8. Guideline 8 says this: compound words are divided where joined. Compound words are divided where joined. Now, a compound word is simply a word that's made up of two words. And you say, well, how do I know that? Well, after a while, you'll learn those words, and you'll be able to see and know that there's two words in that sentence, or in that word, especially with regard to prepositions. And that first phrase is a preposition of both of those words, anti and ek. And you can see anti-Christos is divided right there in the middle, and ek balo, ek is a preposition meaning out, and balo means I cast or I throw, so literally I cast or throw out. Anti-Christos means the Antichrist. And so you're going to divide those words up where there's sort of a natural break, okay, between two words that have come together to form one word. Well, let's go to the board now, and let's see if we can make application of some of these rules that we've talked about. And again, I just want to remind you and encourage you, these are just some guidelines. If you think about this, the guidelines can be a little bit difficult, and I don't mind telling you, sometimes I have trouble with following along with some of those guidelines, but I like to give them to people because some people really like to have some rules to learn better how to pronounce those words and where to divide them up. And so let's see if we can practice our rule here. Well, those guidelines, if we follow those guidelines, this word logos is going to be divided where? Take a look at it. Take a look at it and think about it for just a moment. Remember that we're going to have one vowel or one diphthong per syllable. All right, we've got two vowels here, and we also have a rule that says that when you have a consonant by itself, it's going to go with the following vowel. Okay, so right here is how we're going to divide this word. Logos. Logos. And you can see again that we've got one vowel in that syllable and one vowel in that syllable. The consonant that was wedged between the two vowels goes with the following vowel. The sigma on the end here, when you have a consonant at the end of a word, is going to accompany the preceding vowel. All right? Now take a look at this word, adelphos. Adelphos. And take a moment to look at that and see. Think about where would you divide that word? Where would you divide that word? Okay, remember, we've got a vowel here, and a vowel here. And as I look at this word, I know that I also have a consonant wedged in between two vowels. So what's the rule say? The rule says, or the guideline says, that the consonant that's by itself is going to go with the following vowel. So I'm going to put a mark here, ah. All right, and then I end up having, by the way, a cluster, right? And this cluster doesn't go together. It'd be kind of hard to even pronounce that. How would you say that? See, that's where you sort of go along with your feelings on that. If you went along with your feelings on that, you would kind of understand that it would be hard to just say, luf. It'd be hard to do that. So here's one of those. Again, it's a cluster that we're going to divide up, Adel, and then we have a consonant that's going to go with the following vowel, and then you have this final consonant that goes back with the preceding vowel, and that's how you would divide that up. Adelphos. Adelphos. And that means brother. And by the way, I didn't mention this a moment ago, but logos means word. It means word. Adelphos means brother. Okay, let's look at this next one here. Now look at it closely. Angelos. 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 That means angel. Now let's take a look at this. We have right away noticing a double consonant here, the double gamma, and we've got to separate that, the guideline says. So we're going to draw a line right through here. This gamma is going to come back with this preceding vowel, forming one syllable. Remember, this has the N sound. When you see the double gammas together, give that first gamma the N sound. All right, so angelos. Now let's look at the rest of this. Well, we've got here a situation where I have a consonant that is wedged in between two vowels. All right, and when they're wedged in between two vowels, it's going to go with the following vowel, and so we're going to divide it right here. Angelos. Angelos. All right, the last word now is the Greek word euangelion. Euangelion. And this is the word gospel found in Romans 1:16, where the Apostle Paul said, "For I'm not ashamed of the gospel." It is a noun, and it's in the neuter, and we'll talk more about what that means a little later on. But if we look at this, first of all, we have a diphthong here, don't we? All right, we have a diphthong, and we've got a vowel that follows it. We know that we have to have one vowel or diphthong per syllable, so we're going to have to divide it right there. You, and then we've got a double gamma, so we're going to divide that right there. You, on, and then we end up having a consonant right here. All right, that's going to go with the preceding or the following vowel. So euangelion. Okay, euangelion, and that's how we would divide up that word in that instance. All right, well, maybe that gives you some sort of feeling for how words are divided up into their syllables. And if you don't quite understand all of that, that's okay, because now I'm going to show you even a faster and quicker way to learn how to say some of these words if you're not quite sure of how to pronounce them. And that involves looking at a book that I'm going to share with you. Go over here to our library and pull this book off the shelf. And if you'll notice, it's the book, The Strong's Exhaustive Concordance of the Bible. This is a great tool for every Christian, whether they're a new babe in Christ or whether they're a mature Christian preacher, one who studied a lot. This is an invaluable tool for a lot of different reasons. But the purposes, or our purpose to talk about it today, is to refer to the fact that in the back of this concordance there is a Greek dictionary and a Hebrew dictionary. And by the way, Strong's book will number every word. It gives it a numerical number, or it gives it a number, and that way you can easily track that word through other books. And so let's say that you were looking up the word ecclesia, and you looked it up alphabetically here. It would show the word Matthew 16, or show the reference Matthew 16:18, and then it would, out beside there, give you a number. And that number then would send you to the back of this dictionary. You look it up then by its numerical order and find that word for church, and it's going to have the Greek word, it's going to have how to pronounce that word, it's going to have a transliteration of that word, and I want to show you that at this time. When you would turn to the back of that Greek concordance, or that English concordance that is put together entitled Strong's, you're going to notice that all the words have been given a number, as we have said, and each of those numbers are in their numerical order, as you would expect, so they're easy to find. Now, when we looked, if we would have gone to Matthew 16, or gone to the word church and looked that up in the concordance, we would have seen that it would have been given the number 1577. All right. Well, we looked that up in the back of that dictionary then. Here's an example of that page that you're looking at. And now we come here and we see there's the Greek word for us. The word church, here it is, ekklesia. Now, something that Strong's does for you that's very nice is that it transliterates the word. Transliterates the word. And we haven't talked a lot about what that means, but let me tell you just quickly what it means. Essentially, a transliteration is matching up a English letter with the sound that is made in Greek. So if you have the Greek sound we try to find a corresponding letter in English that sounds like that, and there's our E. Same thing. Kappa, k, and we find a K, we're going to put that there, and so forth. The lambda, la, we use our English L. So you spell it out just like it sounds in Greek, but you use English letters. And that's called the transliteration of the word ecclesia, the Greek word ecclesia. Now the third thing that the Strong's Dictionary does for you is give you a sort of way to pronounce it. See? Ecclesia. Ecclesia. And so that can be very, very helpful. Plus Strong's goes on to give you a short little definition of that word. It's very concise. I wouldn't recommend necessarily using Strong's Greek dictionary as your primary dictionary, but it can be helpful and useful. But the main thing that we're interested in right now is showing you how that the Strong's Concordance can enable you to learn how to pronounce those words. All right, well that completes that section of this particular lesson, and I'd like for us to move to a new section now that has to do with vocabulary. So let's spend some time talking about vocabulary. It's real important that we learn those words that will be assigned to you from session to session. We're going to assign some words today and go over those, and that you make cards. We said something about that at the beginning of this particular lesson. And to encourage you with learning those vocabulary words, I want to share with you something that is in a book by this individual whom I have introduced to you before, William D. Mounce, or Mounce is actually how you pronounce it, and it's from the book Basics of Biblical Greek. Now, in this particular book, he mentions something about learning 319 some odd words, and if you'll learn those words, then you'll have a huge percentage of your vocabulary down, and you'll know a lot of the New Testament. Let's take a look at that quote now from this book. Listen to what he says. One of the most frustrating parts of learning language is memorization, especially memorizing vocabulary. And yet, memorizing vocabulary is one of the essential elements if you're going to enjoy the language. If you have to look up every other word, the language loses its charm. Because we are learning Biblical Greek only, we have a set number of words. And statistically, there are a few significant facts. All right, now here are the facts he's going to tell you about. There are 5,437 different words in the New Testament. They occur a total of 138,162 times. But there are only 313 words, and that's 5.8% of the total number, that occur 50 times or more. In addition, for special reasons, you will be asked to learn 6 more words that occur less than 50 times. These 319 words account for 110,425 word occurrences, or 79.92% of the total word count, almost 4 out of 5. And again, essentially what he's saying is if you counted every word in the New Testament and added all those up, and again, whether that word "and," for example, was used many, many times, as he says there 9,153 times or whatever, and you counted all of those up and then worked on 319 of those words, you will essentially ended up knowing 110,425. Now, let's finish out the rest of this quote. For example, the Greek word "kai," that's the word for "and," it occurs 9,153 times. Learn that one word and you know 6.7% of the total word count. Well, you know, that's exciting, isn't it, to think about it? That if you will just concentrate on those 319 words that he has in his text, and most of those words are the same words that I'm going to encourage you to learn, and if you'll learn the bulk of those words, or learn all of them, you'll know about 79% of the words that are actually used in the New Testament. Now, there'll be other words that you'll come across and that you may want to learn. Sometimes those words are only used one time in all of the New Testament. But you can always use some keys to assist you as you read along or as you're looking through those words. I just wanted to give you that quote to encourage you to work on those vocabulary words, because in most languages you're going to have to learn a lot more than 319 words in order to be able to converse. But that's just talking about now. We're just talking about the world of the New Testament and the Koine Greek. All right, let's turn our attention now to learning some of these vocabulary words, and I want you to go ahead and get your grammar book out by David Allen Black that we've been using in this course. Remember this textbook. Go ahead and get that out, and I want you to turn to page 8 in the textbook, to page 8, and we're going to go down through that list of words. And in just a moment, we're going to pull those words up on the screen so that you'll be able to see them one by one. But I want to recommend that if you do have a text or a copy of that particular page, have it out in front of you, because in the book we have the accent marks that are listed. We don't have the accent marks on the words themselves as they come up on the screen, but you'll see them in the book, and we'll try to follow by those accent marks as best we can. So here we go. Let's go to the first word. The first word is apostolos. Now go ahead and say it. Apostolos. And that's the word that means apostle. And you can see that that word apostle is just a transliterated word. In English, it comes right out of Greek, apostolos. All right, the next word, soma. Notice the stress is on the omega. Soma. And that's the word for body. And if you'll notice just to the right of that in your text and also on the screen, there's a cross-reference to this in our English word somatic. Somatic comes from this word. Psychologists use the word psychosomatic to refer to individuals whose body is affected by their mind, that their mind has sort of tricked them, as it were, into thinking that maybe something is wrong with them physically. And the word psyche comes from the word psyche, which has reference to mind, or sometimes soul, of course. But those two words together then have reference to the mind as it has an impact upon the body, psychosomatic. But here our Greek word is just somatic, or soma for body. All right, let's take a look at the next word. The next word is the Greek word phone. And notice the stress is on the eta, phone. All right, or phone. And it's the word for sound. Our word phone or telephone comes from this particular word. All right, let's take a look at the next word. Cardia. Cardia. Cardia is the word heart. Heart. And you can see the word there, cardiac. Cardiac. In the hospital, a physician might speak about an individual going into cardiac arrest. In other words, their heart has stopped. And one of the fascinating things I think that you're going to see about a lot of these Greek words is that they are used by the medical profession. And it's just been amazing and interesting to me to go and visit maybe a physician or be at the hospital when someone was sick, and the physician walks in and begins talking, and they'll mention some words that, and I've never been to medical school, know very little bit about medicine. And I'll hear them pronounce a word or say a word, and I think I can almost figure that out and know what they're talking about, because a lot of those medical terms come right out of the Greek language. All right, let's look at the next word. The next word is phobos. Phobos. And that's the word for fear. A lot of our words phobia that you hear in English come from that word, phobia. All right, look at the next word. Genos. Genos, for race. Race. Genos. All right, let's look at the next word. Philippos. Philippos. And then the transliterated word is Philip. Philip. All right, let's look at the next word. Exodos. Exodos. And that means departure or to go out. And our English word Exodus comes from this Greek word. Look at the next word. Zoe. Zoe. And that's the word for life. And our English word zoology, which is the study of animal life. Zoology comes from this word. All right, look at the next word. Petros. Petros for Peter. Petros. All right, and that means Peter. All right, let's look at the next word. Theos. Theos. That's the word for God. And of course, the English word theology. Theology comes from this word, and theology is the study about God in its strictest sense, in its strictest meaning. And of course, there is a lot that falls under the umbrella of theology. But anyway, you can begin to see again how many of our English words come from these Greek words. Let's take a look at the next one. Gune. Gune. And that's the word for woman. And our English word gynecology comes from that word. All right, take a look at the next word. Pater. Pater. Our English word father comes from this. We talk about someone being the paternal father, or as opposed to someone who is the adopted father. And so paternal has reference to father, and of course our word father comes from this Greek word pater. All right, let's take a look at the next word. Psyche. Psyche. The word for soul. Soul, our word psychology comes from that. I mentioned that earlier. Polis. Polis. And that means city. And our English word political comes from that word, polis. All right, the last and final word for this section is the word Christos. Christos. And of course, that means Christ. Okay, well, those are the vocabulary words for this chapter. And before our next lesson, I want you to be sure and learn all of those words, commit them to memory. And if you'll do that, I think you're going to enjoy Greek so much more, and it'll be a lot easier for you when we begin to talk about some of the rules of grammar. Before we end this session, I want to go ahead and go through a reading exercise at this point. And if you would like to, you could stop the video and take a look at 1 John, or rather John chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, and just see if you can read that on your own. You say, well, I don't know all of those words. Well, that's okay. You can still work on trying to pronounce them. And then you can come right back with us and read along as I read that particular scripture out loud. So to give you a little bit of help in hearing some of these words and how they're pronounced. And I think it's real important that when you're learning Greek to not only see it, but to hear it, to say it out loud, to engage all of the areas of the brain to reinforce what you're learning. So at this time, let's take a look at John chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. What I'm going to do is point to the word and just pronounce it, and then move my pointer on down and so forth, and we'll go down there and I'll pronounce the word. So just try to follow along with me and say it out loud if you can. Again, if you've had the opportunity to maybe stop the video and read this before I do, I think that would be great. But let's go ahead now and just read through this section. Notice this first letter is actually a capital letter that begins our paragraph, as we said capital letters do, and this is the Greek letter epsilon. All right, here we go. N, arche, ein, ha, logos. Now notice the rough breathing mark above the omicron. Ha, logos. Chi, see the diphthong there? Ha, logos. Ain, pros, ton, theon. Chi, theos, ain, ha, logos. Now notice here there's a rough breathing mark. Hutos, hutos. Ain, en, arche. Pros, ton, theon. Panta, de. Now here's something that I haven't spoken to you about, and that is the use of this apostrophe here. Sometimes when Greek has a preposition and or the last letter of that word ends in a vowel and the very next word is a vowel, that vowel will drop off and they put an apostrophe there to let you know that. So we're just going to pronounce it then as di. So di, autu, egenita, egenita. All right, then back here, kai, choris, autu, egenita, ude, and then notice the rough breathing mark, hen. All right, then we have our period, a new sentence. Ha, geganen, en, auto, zoe, ain, kai, hey, see the rough breathing mark? Hey, zoe, ain, ta, phos, ton, anthropon. Kai, ta, phos, en, te, scatia, phine, see the diphthong there? Kai, he, scatia, alta, u, katalaben. Okay. Well, that completes that reading exercise, and hope that was helpful to you. And as we bring this lesson to a close, again, I want to thank you for joining us and for being with us. And I'm looking forward to our next lesson as we talk about the Greek verb system. Before we close, I want to remind you that there are some assignments. We do have a few assignments, and if you'll notice those on the screen, you need to read, practice reading 1 John chapter 1, verses 5 through 10. Now the catch is that you need to read that in Greek. And you say, well, I don't know the words. Again, it doesn't matter what they mean, if you know what they mean or not. Just practice pronouncing them. And then the second assignment is to read chapter 2 on the Greek verb system. And in our next session, we'll talk about that. We'll go over some of that and hopefully explain it in such a way that it'll be helpful to you. Thank you again for joining us. Hang in there, work hard, stay with us. I know you'll be glad you did. And so until next time, I bid you a very pleasant good day.